Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with well-being coach and teacher Maria Mays. She is on a mission to help folks take power back from anxiety. Her journey to take her power back was a long one. In 2020, she stepped out of a 20-year career in technology to launch Take 5 with the intention of helping other working parents reduce anxiety and tension. She has condensed much more than a decade of research, education, certifications, and experimentation into her offerings for individuals and work teams. We get into quite a bit. Enjoy this interview.
Thank you for taking a minute out. I appreciate it. What I would like to do is to start off before we get into your life and your work, that very important work you're doing. How did you survive COVID over these last couple of years, and how did that process change the way that you approach life and even your job?
So I appreciate that question, and certainly my life changed quite a bit as a result of the pandemic. So in fact, the reason I'm doing the work I'm doing right now is because I had done quite a bit of work to take my power back personally from anxiety, which I've lived with a long time, prior to the pandemic hitting. And so I had become really consistent with my practices, things like meditation, mindful movement, nutrition changes, and just overall a lifestyle that was more mindful prior to the pandemic arriving. And so when it initially hit, I was actually, the company I was working for decided to pull out of the United States. And so I had to go through that process of laying off the U.S.-based team, and then myself went through a layoff. And so as I went through that, the way I responded to those challenges, as well as concerns, obviously, for my family's health, especially my mom and my mother-in-law, who were in their 80s, lots of, potential for just unraveling and falling back into prior fear cycles that I lived most of my life with. So the way I got through it was just staying consistent with my practices. And that's what actually brought me to transitioning from my career in software at the time, even though I had started was teaching on the side to try to pay it forward in terms of the healing I'd found through these different modalities for anxiety. But I hadn't transitioned into it being my full-time focus. And I felt just really compelled as a result of seeing those in my sphere of influence, those in my family, really succumbing to the intensity of the fear that was a result of the pandemic. Not just the COVID-19 itself, but all of the associated effects of it, all of the fear-based media, making that so much more exponentially dramatic, right? And so for me, it was a tipping point where, as people would ask me, wow, you're really kind of flowing here. You're not falling apart. How are you getting through this without, all this panic and such? I looked at, my life, and I realized it was the lifestyle I had created, and it wasn't something that happened overnight. This is something that was, a decade in the process prior. So it really slowed me down, though. I was still, even though I had all these tools in my toolbox, I was still running 100 miles an hour. I mean, I've always been a go-goer and a do-doer. And so the pandemic, I think the gift it offered all of us was that slowness in such a fast-paced lifestyle that most of us led. It really, for me, slowed me down, allowed me to really evaluate. And so that's kind of what brought me to what I'm doing today.
So let's take you into a classroom right now, your career day in front of third graders, and one of the kids looks up at you and says, what do you do for a living, and how are you qualified to do that? How would you answer them?
Okay, so I would thank that third grader for his very broad question and say I help people find a baseline of inner peace. And the way I do that is I share different techniques and through teaching. And I also coach them, just like your coach out on the soccer field, through things like beliefs that maybe aren't helping them about themselves, limiting beliefs, things that have held them back from achieving that baseline of peace. And then lots of techniques that are very, very old and very, very time tested. So techniques like meditation, which I'm certified through Chopra Global as a meditation instructor. Techniques like overall lifestyle changes through Ayurveda, which is another very old science that translates literally to the science of life. And so that's a consciousness-based approach to health that allows us to look at the whole body, mind, and spirit, and allows us to come back to ourselves, so to get more in line with the rhythms of nature. And so, again, I'm certified through Ayurveda through Chopra Global. And then I also teach yoga, which combines a lot of the teachings of both of those sciences and incorporates both stillness-based yoga in terms of true meditation, being still, but also movement. So I would share with that third grader that, you know, we are full of energy, right? We are all energy, but sometimes our energy gets dulled. Sometimes it's too wild. And sometimes we find ourselves with a monkey that's in the mind, that's running and doing somersaults and flips up there. And these are all tools that I've been certified in that I can leverage to help you liberate yourself or take your power back from that monkey. So give the monkey a banana with one of these tools to calm it down. So, yeah, I would say that's the core of it, to help other people find their state of inner peace that's a baseline. Because the reality is we're not always there all the time. We've got, you know, things that come up in life that throw us off. But if we can come back to that place of just calm and inner peace, it allows us to manage all of life's events much more easily.
So when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That is a really good question. I don't know that I had a specific goal other than I wanted to be a businesswoman. In the fact that I would set up my little desk, you know, and this is more from what my mom has told me than actual memories. But I do remember different times going with my dad, different places. My dad was in a sales role for structural granite for lots of buildings. So he would travel all over, and I would hear him on the phone, and my dad was my idol. He was my mentor. He was, you know, he was everything to me. And so I really wanted to be just like him. And so that's actually what I ended up doing right out of college, going into technology, sales, and marketing.
Who've been role models or mentors for you in your life that you've looked up to that inspired you to do what you do?
So I've had, my first one would be my father. You know, it's interesting that he's the one that inspired me to go into more of the sales world initially, but I see him guiding me in so many ways now through the work that I'm doing. Even having this conversation with you, because he developed in me a love for jazz, a love for music. And so there's an interesting, you know, connection there just from this connection that we're having. You know, it's one of those things where I see his compassion for other humans and his sense of humor to lighten the mood and his love of music kind of pulling me through my experience now as a teacher and as a coach. Also have other mentors. One in particular was a yoga teacher that I had the pleasure of learning a style of yoga that really focused on mental health. And so I did a mental health certification through her. Her name's Maria Kristen, and unfortunately she passed over the last few years. But she had, again, some of those same qualities, a lightness, creating really safe spaces for us to do our own personal work, which is what I try to do for my clients, allowing that freedom and that bravery to come within the being to then try some of these things that maybe you felt intimidated to try before, or just wasn't sure, if it was for you. And so a lightness, a humor, a compassion, and a tenderness, I think is common between both of those. And then one of my meditation teachers, Roger Gabriel, who's the Chief Meditation Officer at Chopra Global, he really helped me learn how to lighten up. So he has a quote that, how does he say it? I'm trying to think of it. It's not coming to me, so, but it's about really lightening up. Enlightenment, I just remembered it. Enlightenment is really about lightening up. So a lot of times we find ourselves really, serious about trying to meditate just right, or, doing it exactly as, it's expected to be in this beautiful lotus pose with no movement in the body. And the reality is that's not going to work for most people, especially someone like myself who has some prior injuries that prevents me from sitting in certain positions for long. And so what I learned through working with him is that we really overcomplicate things when it comes to meditation, and it comes back to just a really simple, easy way into settling our minds down, and just always remembering that the thoughts that come up as we're trying to still the mind, the sensations in the body that come up as we're trying to fall into what Deepak would call the gap, those are all just components of stress making their way out of the body. They need to release somehow, and that's the beauty of meditation, is that it allows for that release to occur. So there's many more, but those are a few that have similar qualities. So
if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
I would like to talk to Brené Brown. And so I've read quite a few of her books, and just the amount of work she's done in establishing vulnerability as a strength for leaders. I think that's something I'd really like to just pick her brain on more, because what I found in my lifetime is that, at least this lifetime in this body, is that I spent most of my life avoiding being vulnerable. And as I stepped into that, as a result of a lot of the self-work I did through a lot of the modalities that I teach now, there's a freedom that occurs that then becomes a magnet for others to allow them to open. And so by liberating ourselves, we can then help others liberate themselves, because it encourages them to, that it's okay, that it's safe. So I'd love to bend her ear on some of the things she's studied and what she's seen in different populations.
What's been the best fan letter you've gotten from your new business, your job now? Like, one of the best client responses?
A simple one that I got from a Take 5 member the other day was just that, this helps me mentally, it helps me physically, and it helps me spiritually. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, the word yoga, for example, translates to union. And so we go about our lives in this Western world very disconnected with those three. Typically, we're having kind of a monologue with our body, telling it, things that we're frustrated about or wish it didn't hurt here or what have you, but to really drop into a full communication, a dialogue between those three pieces of us. And so that quick little note there lit me up for the day, because that's what it's all about. That's why I'm here.
Let's say you have a dream tonight, you run into the younger version of yourself, and you could give that young version, like your 20-year-old version, a piece of advice. Based on the wisdom you've gained over all these years, what would you say to that younger version?
Oh, I would say you are whole as you are. There's no thing, there's no person nor experience that is going to make you whole, because you already are, because you are a divine being. I would say have compassion for yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself, and don't play so small.
So everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of yourself. Who do you think you are?
I think I am a light warrior. And by that, I mean I am resilient through a lot of challenges and chronic health conditions. I am compassionate. And I'm very connected to the truth that nature has to offer us. And I think as I bring those things into my mission and into my vision, which is truly to create a more beautiful, peaceful world for this generation and the next, I try to do that starting at home, starting with how I feed my kids before they leave for school, the level of peace on the car drive to school, because quite frankly, in my life, it used to be chaos because I was always in such a rush, and that energy then transmutes to the children. And so now I bring an energy of peace everywhere I go. And so as a result, I'm hoping to help others liberate themselves and for it to be a little contagious.
So, Maria, if anybody out there listening wants to know more about your services, more about what you offer, anything else about you, where can they go? Where's the best place?
They are welcome to hit my website, which is take5.health. And so rather than .com, it's .health. And there is a correlation there to Dave Brubeck's Take 5.
I was wondering.
One of the reasons, so there's a couple reasons I named my business that. One is when I was recovering from a nervous breakdown, I couldn't fathom taking more time than just that for myself. I had to start there because that's all I could do at the moment. The other is that 5 breaths can change you, change the world if we all took them. Slower than normal, deeper than normal breaths. If your audience were to take a moment to try that in the next few minutes, just slowing and deepening the breath, the 5 breath cycles, it will change not only your perception in the moment, but also your physiology. And then also, I happen to be listening to Take 5, which my dad would play on repeat many a year. And so it just made all the sense in the world when that idea came to my head that that's what my business should be called. And so in addition to take5.health as the domain, you can find me on social media, which is just at take5health, no dot. And I do have a newsletter subscription where each Wednesday I put out wellbeing tips, and I release one of my 5-minute stretch and breath breaks, which you can do at your desk or anywhere else to take your power back from anxiety. So those are available through that subscription, or you can become a member and get the whole library.
So here's a little bit of jazz trivia for you that might, be of interest, especially for you being in the realm of health. So Paul Desmond, who was with Dave Brubeck, was the one that held the rights to Take 5, and he was kind of a real family, wife, or anybody around. And they literally asked him before he passed, where would you like the proceeds for the song to go? And he picked the American Red Cross. And I think that this day, that is one of the biggest contributors annually to the fund for the American Red Cross, is the proceeds from Take 5.
Oh my goodness, I just got the chills. What a beautiful gift. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's
it's
beautiful.
Wild. It's one of those little jazz nuggets. So if you ever get on that, Who Wants to Win a Millionaire or Jeopardy, you got the answer. It's Paul Desmond.
Paul Desmond, okay.
he's the guy, for sure. Well, hey, Maria, thank you very much for opening up. Good luck with everything. I appreciate it.
All right. Likewise. You have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.